So I am Erika, Fülöp, and Dene couldn't come in person, unfortunately. So unfortunately, you can't see her, but you will see our slides. This paper has two main objectives. At first, we would like to present this pilot project to grow the currently largest fully open access born digital literature repository, the Electronic Literature Organization's Dene, managed by the Electronic Literature Lab by Dene at Washington State University, Vancouver, to develop this into a distributed network of shared born digital literature archives worldwide. Ambitious, but we'll start with Europe and France in particular. And on this basis, we'd also like to invite a discussion on how this project could contribute to and be aligned with the Connecting Archives initiative. So that's fine. To say a few words about electronic literature and digital electronic literature, it is broadly defined as works that engage with the computer-specific capabilities and exhibit a substantial creative linguistic aspect. And this is situated on the crossroads of literary traditions, language, visual arts, digital technology, and contemporary culture. And as such, and you've got a few examples here, which might seem quite similar to the other works, you know, from digital media arts. So as such, it constitutes a continuum with other forms of born digital art and writing, such as computer art, net art, new media art, and video games. Such complex digital publications, however, represent, as we all well know, a collection and preservation challenge for archives, libraries, and museums, because they are highly unstable, including when archived. And you also very well know these images from the Internet Archives and the missing plugin, and when you need to download things that don't exist anymore or wouldn't work. So the hardware, software, and infrastructures they rely on are subject to rapid change, deterioration, and obsolescence. Finding technical solutions for stabilizing and making these artifacts accessible for researchers and the general public is therefore essential for our understanding of late 20th and 21st century culture and society, which is again very similar to the preservation issues you meet in other new media art. In the age of growing concerns about environmental and health impact of global travel, it is also crucial to establish archives and exhibition spaces fully accessible remotely.
So this takes us to ELO's The Next, which contains over 3,000 works of born digital literature and net art, video games, and scholarly information relating to them. Now, these works are organized along 6 collection themes, such as showcases, online journals, individual artists and scholars. We have up to 40 collections currently in The Next. What sets us apart is that we also hold the local copies for all the works that are in the catalog on a server, maintaining those works online and for access to the public. Additionally, the works in The Next undergo conservation by my lab. And we talked about that earlier in this session. Other people are doing this kind of work. We are also doing it in my lab. For example, we've saved hundreds of net art works created with Adobe Flash. Or have required Java applets, for example. We've converted MIDI files to MP3s, et cetera, with these works with permission of the artist. We've also conserved works that were built in HyperCard, StorySpace, Hypergate. We built The Next in open web languages and ARIA so that it's easily accessible, and devised a metadata schema that makes it available for people with disabilities and sensory sensitivities. Finally, we've also visualized the physical media. And as some of you know, these works came with little folios and our little book-like packaging. We've tried to visualize that so that people looking at these works can get a sense of what they involve. We also try to make the posters from festivals available as 3D models, that kind of thing. So we're currently in our 4th stage of development. We were originally seeded by a Mellon Foundation grant in 2018, and we continue to receive operational funding from the Electronic Literature Organization, by my university, and by individual donors. We have a standing donation that comes to us. With this foundation established, we're looking now for distribution to international research site for assured durability and accessibility over time, and for distributed and diversified collection, development, and use. Now, a distributed network, right? So this follows the lots of copies, keep safe mentality. The distributed network will enable various teams to work on different preservation projects and enrich the collection simultaneously. We're going to be sharing them across a network for safekeeping and alternative access. This will also help to address two of the main challenges currently facing born digital literature preservation. First, the fact that there are a lot of works waiting to be archived that, if not addressed now, risk being relegated to the digital dark ages, right? Due to technological obsolescence and lack of accessibility. And second, this digital heritage exists across continents. Erika represents a whole lot of work coming out of France that have yet to be addressed. Also requires a variety of language competency, expertise in a given cultural space, and local access and connections to identify and obtain existing copies of works as the authorization to make them available. I just received last week, handed me copies from Radio, which is an Italian publication that came out in the 90s, very rare. And we've been given permission to rip the floppy disks and try to get them working again. So it's just those kinds of things we're thinking about and including in the next.
So we propose to build the next France as a pilot and first new site of a planned network, providing the opportunity to develop the necessary workflow for sharing and enriching collections and metadata across borders and languages. European national libraries, such as the French National Library and the British Library, have been collecting and researching emerging formats in recent years, feeding into the French Archives de l'Internet and the UK Web Archives, for instance, and building thematic collections of captured playable instances of interactive websites. And they have also been collecting other formats, such as apps and video games occasionally, on obsolete physical media. And they are aiming to scale up these activities, but they don't have the resources either. The French National Library has also collaborated with the digital poet and scholar Fülöp to make accessible the now obsolete and otherwise inaccessible classics of French digital poetry. But there exists currently, I think, one or two physical computers in one side of the French National Library when you can see these works, and they are not easy to find, and even the librarians don't really know where they are and what there is exactly. So that's just to give you an idea of the scale. So due to the relevant legal deposit legislation, as well as the practical limitations related to the obsolete dependencies, because these works exist currently only in the form of virtual machines, very heavy, they are so mostly accessible on site, if at all. Other projects such as AMSI, Prizome, and ADA and other offer information about works, displaying them through external links, but mostly not hosting the works themselves. More than a database or directory, ISEA the Next is unique in being a repository of openly accessible files, local files of born digital literature and net art, and detailed documentation about them. So while institutional structures often separate born digital art and literature, and they find themselves in libraries versus museums or other places, the boundaries remain blurred, and the archival issues are very much shared between us. That's why we are here. So with this project, we are also aiming to open new avenues for practice sharing across the fields, including emerging formats such as expanded reality, AI, geolocation, etc., which don't currently have very good solutions for preservation.
So in setting up the next fronts, our goal is therefore to provide a proof of concept for a distributed network of shared born digital literary archives and develop born digital literature preservation activities in France.
So our specific objectives are, first of all, to set up this server for born digital literature archive in France, which would hold version of ISEA's The Next. Thereby, we'll start piloting this global distributed network of digital literature labs. Then this would also allow us to create an actual digital literature laboratory and library in France that will act, hopefully, as a proactive interdisciplinary research networking hub and experimental space. Then this would also involve initiating a US-France closer collaboration for the development of these collections and preservation practices, and to pilot the workflow that would allow us to both develop the preservation initiatives in each lab and to share those back and forth in both directions. And this would involve more specifically, refining the metadata schema for these emerging digital formats, which Dene has much work on already, and developing the linked open data for bond digital literature adapted to the specific purposes of these objects, including through Wikidata, and in collaboration, hopefully, with the Connecting Archives project for interoperability. We'd also like to, through this pilot, the integration of the next catalog into a standard French university library catalog for increased visibility and discoverability for teaching and research, and to develop the collections further with French materials, which are currently unavailable. And last but not least, to raise the visibility of these objects and the availability, and highlight the relevance of these born digital art and literature pieces for digital cultural literacy, actively engaging the range of audiences and critical thinking about the interactions among language, culture, and technology today.
So I'm going to talk about methodology and how we propose to proceed with this project. The ELOs and X has been built with, as I mentioned, with open web languages and can be hosted on a basic Apache server. It makes it easy to port to another site. In other words, the Next has essentially been containerized. Because ELOs and X holds thousands of born digital works, however, once moved, it's crucial to test them in order to ensure that all the files have been transported and any software dependencies addressed. We were working with Compute Canada originally with this project, and when we ported it back into our own server, we found that this was an issue and have perfected the methodology for this. Based on my lab's experience, therefore, we anticipate the migration and testing to take about 8 months. The Next France web resource will initially copy ELs, the ELOs and Next, and then develop its own identity with a recognizable family link to the Next network and its appearance. And we have artists online that will help with that. In refining the metadata for born digital literature, as I mentioned earlier, we're working with our own metadata schema, but we're building it out of MODS, which is the metadata object description schema maintained by the Network Development and MARC Standards Office of Library Congress, to include the taxonomies, and we also include the taxonomies developed by the Consortium of Electronic Literature, resulting in what we're calling ELMS, the Extended Electronic Metadata Schema. And this involves things like digital aspects of the work, items that are not addressed by MODS. And more recently, with Erika's help, our team has developed a metadata schema that extends to address visitors with needs that are who are disabled or have sensory sensitivities by identifying the material's physical requirements and accessibility tools needed. So in other words, if you're hearing challenged, then you're told in advance that a work requires sound, has sound. We propose to work with the Wikimedia France to set up a born digital literature wiki project tracking progress via the Programs and Events dashboard, and will organize 2 wikithons to be held in the ELO conferences, building a community of volunteers to edit, to create, enhance the Wikidata entries and Wikipedia articles of authors and works of notable born digital literature. And with a focus on non-English speaking world, marginalized groups, indigenous communities, religious minorities, people of color, to expand the collections. We'd like this aspect of the project to be aligned with the Connecting Archives project to ensure interoperability, and that the data also feeds into the global database for better discoverability and complementing the information available on born digital arts and other participating archives.
Then I mentioned the integration into the library catalog. we would look at closed university libraries and to map the ALMS metadata to MARC, standard library catalog metadata schema, write a crosswalk script to translate this metadata for integration in the library catalog. So the catalog items will contain the link to the relevant item on the next France website, and this integration will aim to affirm the place of digital literature in the overall landscape of contemporary literature and facilitate teaching and research activities in the field. Then the next stage would be collection development, namely starting with a pilot digital preservation project that will allow us to develop and test the workflows and infrastructure that enable the teams around each server to work independently on local initiatives and share new additions to the archives. The pilot would make available the digital works published in the pioneering French digital periodical ISEA, which has 14 issues spread across its 20 years history, starting from 1989 up till 2010, which contains 92 generative, animated, and multimedia poems created for evolving generations of PCs and Mac. Working with founder, author, and editor Fülöp, we will assess the work's technical requirements and try to figure out technical solutions, but they don't actually exist for all these types of works, to try and make them available remotely through a web server. Then the last very important point would be teaching and dissemination and engagement activities to make this work visible. So based on the pilot experience of distributed collection developments, we would prepare teaching materials for the global digital preservation community if they would like to apply this methodology of working together with other archives on the same format through the same basis, as well as guidance for teachers, students, and the general public who might be able to access the archives. The new European collection would also be the basis of teaching materials and interdisciplinary modules for undergraduate and postgraduate students, and then there are no limits to the work you could do with it, potentially. The preservation activity and the new digital archive site and collection will also provide an opportunity to increase the visibility through public libraries and public events in the different places beyond the walls of the university.
So in conclusion, overall, this project will provide a proof of concept for the distributed network of archives based on the premise of close collaboration through collection sharing and work division. It'll elaborate the methodology of extending the network with new nodes, as well as preservation workflow and enhanced safekeeping of the archives, as well as their visibility. The linked open data and participatory database development component will provide the possibility for joining the Connecting Archives initiative, reducing the disciplinary and institutional divide that separates creative born digital artifacts into art and literature collections, while nevertheless also allowing to maintain the identity of the fields for practical and research purposes, such as work division and historical approaches.
So we are currently seeking funding. We've already tried around based from the UK, but now we're trying another option from France. And we are most important, and here looking also for collaborations and sharing of ideas for the realization of the project. So if based on this you got any feedback, please let us know, or any thoughts, comments, questions, criticisms. We would like to invite a discussion on the best ways of working together and moving forward, and welcome expressions of interest also of working together. Thank you.